the years of 1989 and 1990 represented a strategic defeat for the revolutionary camp, bringing about the crisis of socialism and of its theoretical framework, the Marxism. Since then, the revolutionary and advanced force of the world have been confronted with a major task to overcome the crisis of Marxism and to reaffirm socialism on a new basis, that of enriching and developing Marxism and struggling against the dogmatism that hardened the Marxism. What are your opinions about this theme?
This is a big theme, and we could talk the whole evening about this. On the one hand, I already have some problems with the presupposition of your question when you say that 89 was a big defeat of revolutionary forces. 89, in my view, was the defeat of a system which had development to a very authoritarian system, and the inspiration, a revolutionary inspiration, I think, was minimized. There was a revolutionary start, of course, but also for Marxists it must be an important task to consider, to explain how this development of the Soviet Union from 1917 to 1989 could happen, what were the causes, because this breakdown was not by accident or by external catastrophe. It was a breakdown from the inside. And this, I think, we have to accept, we have to analyze, we have to draw conclusions from this. I think I'm in the first years, in the early 90s, the situation seemed that the capitalists worldwide had won the big battle, and that nobody even tries, even had the trust to formulate an alternative to capitalism. It seemed so natural that we can have only capitalism, maybe in this form or in that form, but it must be capitalism. But very quickly, already I think in the late 90s and then in the beginning of the new century, we see worldwide growing protest movements. Protest movements which were caused, which emerge because of the big problems this capitalist system produces. It produced war, it produced poverty, it produced crisis, and people ask how long we have to bear this. What are the causes for this? And then, even when they start from very different points, after a while, at least they will discover that there is this old guy from 19th century who did so much analysis of capitalism that perhaps something is interesting also today. And so, at least I can say this from Germany, from some European countries also, there is a growing interest in Marx, in the Marxian analysis of capitalism, and from this development, I hope that also one time a new movement, stronger movement than we see it now, will emerge. So your question, how to tackle this situation, I think there is not a fixed recipe how to tackle this, but the conditions we see, this new interest in Marx, this gives us, I think, a good chance to intervene and in the long run also to change something.
In Latin America, you have some interesting situations, like the Bolivarianism in Venezuela, and in other countries we have similar situations. How do you conceive this Latin American reality nowadays?
It is a big progress when you think of the past, what was Latin America during the 70s, during the 80s. In many countries, the military, you had a military rule, and now not only this military rule is abolished by a bourgeois government, but in many countries it is a government trying to put forward some social reforms, to bring some advantages to the majority of the people, improving the health system, improving the educational system. So I really see that this is a big progress. But also here, and I must say I don't know very good the situation in Latin America, but according to my impression, it is in the first line, it is a kind of very good social reform, but there is a big distance to come to a socialist society. It is maybe a precondition, but socialism, I think, is something still we have to fight for to get it in the future.
We are watching nowadays a deep economic and even a civilizational crisis in the world. What about the perspectives of this crisis? The ways you can see related to this?
Okay, the perspectives are it's very hard to say something about. We are not no prophets who can look in the future. The only thing we can identify are certain tendencies, certain lines of development. And what I think, what we can identify as a main line is that the basic conflicts of capitalism, that they are increasing. And these basic conflicts are, on the one hand, the conflict between the capitalists and the working class. In many countries, the exploitation of the working class was increased, not only by measures of capitalist enterprises, but also, like in Germany, by measures of the state, that social benefits were reduced, that the tax system was changed in favor of the capitalist class and for the disadvantage of the working class. So this conflict on the one hand is increasing, and in many countries, I must say, in the last decades, the capitalist class have had advantages in class struggle. The other basic conflict we see in a capitalist world society is the conflict between different capitalist nations or coalitions of nations. Here I also see an increasing conflicts and a potentiality for more conflicts in the future between the European Union and United States, but also between such emerging economies like Brazil, like India. Also the role of China in world economy and world politics is increasing, and it is not clear in which direction it will develop. So I think we have a situation where, as well on the economic level, the conflicts are increasing, but there is not, at least in my view, there is not a clear new model which comes out. And even more unclear is the world political situation. The United States are still the superpower measured by atomic weapons and so on. But nevertheless, you have a world, a kind of multipolar world with a lot of increasing centers of power, of diverging economic interests, so that this so-called superpower role of the United States, I expect it will decrease in the next decades. But what from this multipolar world will result, if there are new conflicts between two camps or whatever, I don't know. This in the moment I think we cannot anticipate.
Could you explain something about the mega project?
The mega project, mega, the abbreviation for Marx Engels Gesamtausgabe, will bring, for the first time in history, for the first time, not only the complete works of Marx and Engels, but the complete works, manuscripts and letters without any editorial change. For the first time you can read the manuscripts as they are in the archives. And this really will contribute not only to a new discussion about Marx and his theory, it will also contribute to new views. We really can have new insights by this big project. When I talk with some persons about this mega project, very often I hear the question, okay, Marx, Engels, nearly everything is published. Why now doing such a big project? But this is essentially wrong. It is not everything published, and especially it is not everything published like it was written down. And so I can say on different levels we have new text, new newspaper articles which were written from Marx and Engels. Now we can identify that they are the authors. In the past we couldn't. Some new manuscripts are published, especially regarding Capital. And the biggest new part in Mega are the excerpts. Marx and Engels, the whole life, they were researchers who studied books in a time where you had no copy machines, no internet. You can do everything by a mouse click. They had to write excerpts from books. But when they start to write excerpts, then very quickly they pass to give commentaries, to start with their own considerations. So these excerpts show how the insights, the theoretical approach is emerging. And what also now we can learn by Mega is that the theoretical approaches of Marx and Engels were they covered much more fields and much more issues than in published works were written down. So we can really learn new things by these excerpts. And when I come back to Capital, for the first time we have now the original Marx manuscripts of Capital. Until now we had the editions Engels did after Marx's death of volume 2 and 3, and Engels did his best to produce a book which is readable with his, compared with today possibilities, with rather poor possibilities of editorial work. And if Engels wouldn't have done this, maybe today we wouldn't have Capital. But he did it. But nevertheless, today we must compare the original manuscripts with the edition of Engels, and we can find a lot of differences, especially in fields like crisis theory, like the theory of credit. So in some fields I would recommend, if you want to do a scientific research about Marx, you have to use Mega and the original manuscripts on the one hand, and especially when we look to the volume 3, Engels used a manuscript, the so-called main manuscript, which Marx wrote in the years 1864-65. So what we read now as volume 3 is Marx knowledge, Marx approach in the year 64-65. But he still worked 15 years more, and he produced manuscripts not so comprehensive like the main manuscript, but he had new ideas, new insights, new conceptions. And what he did in these 15 years after, this we can learn from Mega too, and this is very interesting.
A last question. Is there some kind of excerpt of the Capital that was never publicized, even in German?
The whole manuscripts were not published, also in German. Also in German we had the edition of Engels, the edition which was then the basis for a lot of translations all over the world. But this so-called main manuscript of volume 3, for the first time it was published by Mega in the year 1993. The manuscripts for volume 2, these are much more manuscripts, and the editorial tasks are much more complicated than with volume 3. They were published for the first time in the year 2008. This is also in German. It is completely new material of Capital.